Whoa, dude, Bodhi said after I explained my situation, omitting the pure spite and framing it as a lifelong passion for backyard surfing. An S-Series flow barrel in a residential zone? Gnarly. HOA's gonna have a cow, man. That's part of the appeal, I admitted. There was a pause, then a chuckle. Right on. Sticking it to the man. I dig it. Yeah, we can do it. Me and Chaz. It'll cost you though, brother, like seriously cost you. There's a patch of grass in my backyard. Or there was. Right now it's mostly mud, tire tracks, and the lingering scent of chlorine and shattered dreams, but let's rewind a bit. Picture this. Generic suburban backyard hash 47B. Moderately green grass, a slightly wobbly fence separating my domain from Henderson's perpetually barking chihuahua, and a patio that's seen better days, mostly hosting a rusty grill and legions of suicidal ants. For years, I'd look out my kitchen window, coffee mug in hand, staring at that patch of lawn, roughly 20 by 30 feet of untapped potential, and dream. Not big dreams. I'm Dave. I work in IT. Have you tried turning it off and on again? Is basically my mantra. And my ambitions are appropriately scaled. I dreamt of a pool. A simple, in-ground, kidney bean-shaped slice of heaven. Somewhere to escape the beige purgatory of my cubicle farm. Somewhere the kids could splash around. Hypothetically, my kids are teenagers now and mostly communicate via grunts and eye rolls, but the idea was nice. Somewhere I could float on an inflatable flamingo, clutching a lukewarm beer, and pretend I wasn't hurtling towards middle age with the grace of a runaway shopping cart. "Honey, I'm serious this time," I announced to my wife, Sarah, one Saturday morning, gesturing vaguely towards the backyard with my toast. Project Oasis is a go. Sarah peered over her tablet, arching an eyebrow with the kind of practiced skepticism only years of marriage to me could cultivate. Project Oasis. Didn't we call it Operation Big Splash last year and Dave's Donut Ditch the year before? Details, I waved dismissively. This time it's real. I've crunched the numbers. We can swing it. Think of it, Sarah. Summer evenings, gentle lapping sounds, maybe some tasteful tiki torches. Think of it, Dave, she countered, her tone shifting from skeptical to practical. The digging, the cost overruns, the maintenance, and Brenda. Ah, Brenda, the B word. President of the Oakwood Creek Homeowners Association, a woman whose sole purpose in life appeared to be ensuring maximum conformity and minimal joy within a 5-block radius. She patrolled the neighborhood in her beige Camry like a U-boat commander, armed with a clipboard and an encyclopedic knowledge of Bylaw Section 7, Subsection C, Paragraph 2, Acceptable Mailbox Heights. Brenda? I scoffed, trying to project a confidence I absolutely did not feel. What's she going to do? It's a pool. People have pools. It adds property value. She'll probably send us a muffin basket. Sarah just gave me that look. The one that says, "You sweet, naive fool." Dave, this is Brenda we're talking about. Last year she tried to fine the Millers because their garden gnome was non-period appropriate. A gnome, Dave. Okay, maybe not a muffin basket, I conceded. But it's a pool. It's practically the American dream, right after apple pie and crippling credit card debt. We just need to fill out the forms, get the permits. How hard can it be? Famous, last, words. Fast forward a few weeks. Permits acquired, after a baffling quest involving triplicate forms and a visit to a city planning office that smelled faintly of despair. Financing secured. Goodbye, emergency fund. Hello, ramen dinners. And Pool Guys Paradise Inc. were carving up my backyard. Honest Abe and his crew, Tank and Smiley, were good guys. Salt of the earth, sunburnt necks, cracking jokes about finding buried treasure. They found an old Tonka truck and a suspiciously large bone tank swore was dinosaur. The hole got dug. Rebar went in. Concrete, glorious, gray concrete, was sprayed, forming the gentle curves of my kidney bean dream. Tile was laid, a tasteful HOA-approved azure mist, I might add. The filter and pump were installed, tucked away behind what I considered a perfectly adequate lattice screen. Finally, the water truck arrived. Watching that pristine blue water fill my very own pool was transcendent. I felt like Moses parting the Red Sea, if the Red Sea was chlorinated and located next to a slightly dilapidated shed. "She's beautiful, Dave," Sarah admitted, standing beside me, watching the late afternoon sun sparkle on the surface. Even the teenagers emerged from their digital caves, looking mildly impressed. Victory! And then, like a harbinger of doom in orthopedic shoes, Brenda appeared. She didn't walk so much as glide across my lawn, her floral print dress somehow managing to look menacing. Clipboard deployed, eyes narrowed, scanning. She circled the pool perimeter, occasionally poking at the fence with a manicured finger. "Afternoon, Brenda," I said, forcing a smile that felt like stretching cold taffy. "Just admiring the new aquatic enhancement." She ignored me, focusing her laser gaze on the fence post nearest Henderson's yapping menace. She produced a tape measure from a pocket hidden within her dress. Seriously. The woman was a walking Swiss Army knife of bureaucracy. Click, whir. "Mr. Miller," she began, her voice dangerously sweet. "Oakwood Creek HOA Bylaw Section 9, Subsection A, Paragraph 4 clearly states that all boundary fences must maintain a minimum height of 6 feet. She tapped the tape measure against the post. "This section appears to be 5 feet, 11½ inches. I blinked. "Half an inch? Brenda, come on. It probably settled." "Settling," she sniffed, "is not an acceptable deviation. Furthermore," she pivoted, pointing towards the pool equipment. "Subsection F, paragraph 12 requires all mechanical installations to be fully enclosed by materials matching the primary residence. That lattice is non-compliant." "It's tasteful lattice," I protested. "It allows for airflow." "It allows for unsightliness," she countered, scribbling furiously on her clipboard. "And the watercolor. Azure Mist is approved, yes, but this seems excessively vibrant. Are you using unauthorized chemicals?" "It's called chlorine, Brenda. It keeps the algae down." My voice was rising. Sarah subtly placed a hand on my arm. Brenda gave a tight little smile that didn't reach her eyes. "You'll receive an official notice outlining the required rectifications and associated penalties within 48 hours. Good day, Mr. Miller. Do try to enjoy your enhancement while it lasts." She glided away, leaving a vortex of simmering rage and the faint scent of lavender in her wake. Sarah sighed. "Muffin basket, huh?" The notice arrived 36 hours later. Thick, cream-colored envelope, HOA logo embossed in stern navy blue. It felt heavier than it looked, weighted with the sheer density of bureaucratic spite. Sarah and I sat at the kitchen table, the letter spread between us like evidence at a crime scene. It was worse than Brenda's verbal warning. Violation 1. Fence height deviation, minus 0.5 inches. Penalty, $50 per day until rectified. Violation 2. Non-compliant equipment enclosure, lattice. Penalty, $75 per day until rectified. Violation 3. Suspected unauthorized chemical usage, excessive vibrancy. Penalty, $100 pending water sample test. Cost TBD, homeowner liable. Violation 4. Failure to submit final landscaping plan post-construction. Penalty, $25 per day until rectified. I hadn't even thought about landscaping yet. $100 because the water's too blue? I sputtered, pointing a shaking finger at Violation 3. Is she going to personally test it? With what? Her tongue? Dave, calm down, Sarah said, though her own voice was tight. Look, maybe we can just raise that fence post a bit, build a little box around the pump? It's not about the fence, Sarah. It's the principle. It's my backyard. Since when did excessive vibrancy become a finable offense? What's next? A penalty for unapproved levels of fun? My mind was racing. This wasn't just about a pool anymore. This was war. A suburban, passive-aggressive, potentially very expensive war. Fine, I declared, slapping the table. She wants rectification? I'll rectify things. I'm going to the HOA meeting. Sarah buried her face in her hands. Oh, Dave, please don't make things worse. Me? Make things worse? Perish the thought. The Oakwood Creek Community Clubhouse smelled faintly of stale coffee and shattered dreams. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting a sickly pallor on the dozen or so residents seated on uncomfortable folding chairs. At the front, behind a long table draped in beige fabric, sat Brenda and her acolytes, Marge, whose perm seemed to defy gravity, and Gary, who looked perpetually bewildered, like he'd wandered in looking for the restroom, and somehow ended up on the HOA board. Brenda called the meeting to order with a sharp rap of her gavel. Yes, she had a gavel. Agenda items included discussion of pet waste receptacle, placement strategy, review of approved holiday decoration timelines, and Item 7, non-compliant property remediation, 12 Oak Street, that was me. When my turn came, I approached the table armed with photos of my beautiful, slightly too blue pool, and a speech about common sense and neighborly goodwill. I started reasonably. Look, Brenda, board members, neighbors, I understand the need for rules. But half an inch on a fence post? A lattice screen, isn't this a bit excessive? Brenda peered at me over her reading glasses. Mr. Miller, the bylaws exist for a reason. They protect property values and maintain the aesthetic integrity of our community. Exceptions, however minor they may seem to you, create precedent. Precedent leads to chaos. Marge nodded vigorously, her perm wobbling. Chaos. Remember the Henderson incident with the unapproved satellite dish? Took months to resolve. The Hendersons weren't even here. Gary blinked. Satellite? I tried sarcasm. Right, because a slightly short fence post is the first step towards anarchy and Mad Max driving down Main Street. Got it. That earned me a frosty glare from Brenda. Your levity is inappropriate, Mr. Miller. The violations are clear. The penalties are established. Have you taken steps to rectify the situation? I planted a shrub, I said, holding up a picture of a spindly little thing that looked thoroughly depressed to be involved. See, it partially obscures the pump. Brenda consulted her copy of the bylaws. Partial obscurity is not full enclosure, non-compliant. And the fence? I put a little block under the post. A little block? What material was it submitted for architectural review? I was losing it. It's a block of wood, Brenda. It cost $1.50 at Home Depot. Are we really doing this? A vote was called. Predictably, my appeal was denied. The fines stood. As Brenda moved on to the pet waste receptacles, I stalked out, my blood pressure approaching unsafe levels. Driving home, fuming, I knew diplomacy had failed. Reason had failed. Sarcasm had definitely failed. It was time for something else. Over the next week, I tried, sort of. I nailed a few more pieces of wood around the pump, creating a box so ugly it probably violated a different bylaw I hadn't discovered yet. I even bought some slightly less vibrant, red, depressing gray chlorine. Brenda sent another notice. Attempted rectification deemed insufficient and aesthetically displeasing. Penalties continue to accrue. The fines were piling up. My dream pool was becoming a money pit, mocking me with its cheerful blue water, which, infuriatingly, still looked vibrant. Sarah was stressed. I was stressed. Then came the breaking point. It was a Saturday. I was trying to relax by the pool, ignoring the HOA sword of Damocles hanging over my head. Brenda was out front, tending to her prize-winning petunias, which were naturally planted in perfect regulation-approved rows. She was humming, while financially crippling me over half an inch of fence post. Something snapped. That night, fueled by cheap beer and pure spite, I fell down an internet rabbit hole. Ways to annoy HOA legally. Most obnoxious backyard features. Spite fences. And then I saw it. A video thumbnail. Surf's up, backyard wave machine. I clicked. My jaw dropped. It was beautiful. It was insane. A churning, roaring, miniature ocean wave right there in someone's backyard. Expensive? Undoubtedly. Impractical? Absolutely. Guaranteed to violate noise ordinances, water usage restrictions, and Brenda's entire sense of beige-tinted order? Oh, hell yes. An idea, terrible and beautiful, began to form. If she hated my calm, serene, slightly too blue pool, how would she feel about a personal surf park? I found Sarah watching TV. "Honey," I said, trying to sound casual. "Hypothetically, what if we replaced the pool?" She muted the TV. "Replaced it? With what? A Zen garden? Please say a Zen garden." "Not exactly," I said, holding up my phone, displaying the wave machine video. "Think bigger. Think splashier." Sarah watched the video, her eyes widening. She looked at the churning wave. She looked at me. She looked back at the wave. A slow smile spread across her face. "Dave," she whispered, a dangerous glint in her eye. "You wouldn't dare." My grin matched hers. "Oh, Brenda," I murmured to the empty air. "You have no idea." Finding someone willing to install a commercial-grade wave machine in a suburban backyard wasn't easy. Pool companies laughed. Landscapers politely suggested therapy. Then, after days of searching increasingly obscure forums, Hydroengineering Hobbyists Anonymous, Extreme Water Features R Us, I found them. Wave Wizards, Inc. Their website looked like it was designed in 1998, featuring pixelated surfing GIFs and testimonials like "totally tubular dudes." Their contact number connected me to a guy named Bodhi, I swear to God, who sounded perpetually like he'd just woken up from a killer nap. "Whoa, dude," Bodhi said after I explained my situation, omitting the pure spite and framing it as a lifelong passion for backyard surfing. "An S-Series flow barrel in a residential zone? Gnarly. HOA's gonna have a cow, man." "That's part of the appeal," I admitted. There was a pause, then a chuckle. "Right on. Sticking it to the man. I dig it. Yeah, we can do it. Me and Chaz. It'll cost you though, brother. Like, seriously cost you." He wasn't kidding. The quote made my eyes water. It involved words like custom fabrication, high-capacity pumps, geotechnical survey, and significant electrical upgrades. It was roughly the price of a small German sedan. I called my tech-savvy friend Kevin, mostly for moral support, and to see if he thought Wave Wizards, Inc. sounded even remotely legitimate. "Dave, are you sure about this?" Kevin asked nervously after I explained. "This sounds complex and loud and possibly illegal." "Details, Kevin. It's about making a statement. Plus, think of the engineering challenge." I appealed to his inner nerd. He sighed. "Okay, fine. The fluid dynamics are kind of interesting, but if you get arrested, I'm pleading ignorance." Sarah and I had the conversation. "Dave, this is insane," she said, staring at the quote Bodhi had emailed over, complete with a surfer emoji signature. "This is our Fix the Leaky Roof Fund. This is our Kids' College Fund." "Think of it as an investment, honey. I argued, trying to sound convincing. An investment in freedom and property value. Imagine the listing. Charming 3-bedroom ranch with backyard surfing. She just stared at me. But she didn't say no. Maybe she wanted to see Brenda's face as much as I did. I called Bodhi back. All right, Bodhi, let's ride this wave. Righteous, dude. Chaz is gonna be stoked. Let's make some noise. Making noise was an understatement. The arrival of Wave Wizards Inc. and their equipment turned Oakwood Creek into a construction zone spectacle. First came the mini excavator, driven by Chaz, a man who looked like he wrestled bears for fun and communicated primarily in grunts. Then came flatbed trucks hauling massive fiberglass components, pumps the size of refrigerators, and enough PVC piping to replumb a small town. My backyard, already scarred by the pool saga, was transformed into a muddy pit of organized chaos. The noise was constant, digging, drilling, Chaz yelling incomprehensibly over the din. Neighbors emerged, drawn by the commotion. Henderson's Chihuahua achieved new levels of frantic yapping. Mr. Henderson himself just stood on his porch, shaking his head. Mrs. Gable from across the street peered through her curtains, occasionally taking notes. And then there was Brenda. She materialized on day 2, clipboard already in hand, her expression a thundercloud. "Mr. Miller!" She snapped over the sound of Chaz maneuvering a giant blue tub section with alarming speed. "What, in the name of aesthetic harmony, is this?" "Morning, Brenda," I yelled back cheerfully, gesturing vaguely. "Just some advanced hydrotherapy installation. Very therapeutic." "Hydrotherapy?" she scoffed, her eyes narrowing at the massive pump assembly. "That looks suspiciously like industrial machinery. Do you have the required permits for this structure?" Bodhi, who had emerged from supervising the plumbing connections looking remarkably relaxed given the surrounding chaos, sauntered over. "Hey there, ma'am," he said with a disarming grin. "Permits are all squared away. City approved. It's just a high-flow water feature. Totally compliant with, the flow regulations." He winked. I prayed he wasn't lying. Brenda was not disarmed. She circled the perimeter, taking photos with her phone, muttering about setbacks and decibel levels. She spent the next week hovering, a constant, disapproving presence at the edge of my property line. Each clang, bang, and whir seemed to fuel her righteous indignation. The Wave Wizards, Bodhi and Chaz, seemed oblivious, working with a strange combination of laid-back surfer dude energy and intense engineering focus. They argued about pipe diameters, debated sealant compounds, and occasionally took breaks to air surf on the lawn. Kevin came over a few times, ostensibly to observe the fluid dynamics, but mostly just stared in bewildered awe. "Dave," he whispered one afternoon, watching Chaz wrestle a massive filter into place, "this thing is going to use more electricity than the entire block." "Progress demands sacrifice, Kevin," I said sagely. It was inevitable. On day 5 of the installation, Brenda made the call. I was discussing pump calibration with Bodhi when the patrol car rolled up, lights off, but presence undeniable. 2 officers got out, looking professional but radiating a distinct, "not this crap again" vibe. Officer Miller, no relation thankfully, and Officer Chen. "Afternoon, gentlemen," Officer Miller said, adjusting his belt. "We received a complaint regarding excessive noise and unpermitted construction at this address." Brenda scurried over from her observation post on the sidewalk. "Officers! Thank goodness! He's building some kind of industrial wave pool. It's shaking my fine china. There's no way this is legal." I stepped forward, trying to project responsible homeowner, not maniacal HOA troll. "Officers, Dave Miller, there seems to be a misunderstanding. This is a prefabricated water feature. We have permits." I produced the sheaf of papers Bodhi had given me, which looked vaguely official, stamped by some city department I'd never heard of. Officer Chen took the papers, scanning them with a practiced eye. Officer Miller surveyed the scene. The giant half-finished structure, the muddy yard, Bodhi leaning casually against a pump, Chaz pausing mid-grunt. "High-flow recreational water system," Officer Chen read aloud from the permit. "Looks like the basic construction permit is in order, Mr. Miller." He handed them back. "However," Officer Miller added, his gaze stern, "we are getting noise complaints. Standard construction hours apply, 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. weekdays, limited hours Saturday, none Sunday. And once this thing is operational, you'll need to adhere strictly to city noise ordinances. Keep it down." "Absolutely, officers," I said, plastering on my most compliant smile. Neighborly consideration is my middle name. Brenda looked like she was about to spontaneously combust. But it's enormous. It's hideous. It's vibrating." "Ma'am," Officer Miller said patiently, "as long as he has the permits and adheres to the noise laws, it's a civil matter between him and the HOA regarding aesthetics. We can't intervene unless laws are broken." They got back in their car and drove off. Bodhi gave me a thumbs up. Chaz resumed grunting and hitting things with a wrench. Brenda stood rooted to the sidewalk, radiating pure, unadulterated fury. Phase 1. Complete. The beast was taking shape. And the HOA president knew she couldn't stop it. Yet. It took another week. A week of plumbing, wiring, testing, and near-constant surveillance from Brenda. But finally, Bodhi wiped his hands on his shorts, grinned, and declared, "She's primed and ready to rip, dude. Let's make some waves." The moment had arrived. It was Saturday afternoon. The sun was shining. The air crackled with anticipation, and probably ozone from the massive electrical panel Kevin had helped install. Sarah stood on the patio, arms crossed, a mixture of dread and morbid curiosity on her face. Kevin hovered nearby, clutching a sound meter app on his phone like a talisman. I donned my faded board shorts and a ridiculously optimistic grin. "All right," I announced, hand hovering over the large red Start button on the control panel. "Moment of truth, everybody stand back, ish." I pressed the button. For a second, nothing. Then, a low hum started deep within the machine's bowels. The hum grew into a rumble, vibrating through the soles of my feet. Water began to churn in the main tank. The rumble escalated into a roar, a deep-throated mechanical growl that drowned out Henderson's yapping chihuahua and probably the traffic on the distant highway. Then, it happened. Water surged forward, driven by the hidden pumps. It hit the curved slope of the fiberglass structure and rose, folding over itself, forming a wave. Not a gentle, lapping wave. A churning, frothing, honest-to-God surfing wave right there in my backyard. It wasn't exactly pipeline, maybe more like a confused bathtub drain scaled up 1,000 times, but it was mine. It crashed down with a thunderous splash, sending spray arcing high into the air, misting the patio, the fence, and, gloriously, the meticulously pruned edge of Brenda's prize rose bushes next door. "Woo!" I yelled, pumping my fist, momentarily deafened by my own creation. "It works!" Kevin was frantically checking his sound meter, his eyes wide. "Dave, this thing is pushing 95 decibels at the property line. That's way over the ordinance limit." Sarah just stared, speechless, as another wave roared to life and crashed down. Neighbors started emerging from their houses, drawn by the Krakatoa-level acoustics erupting from my unassuming suburban lot. My triumphant roar was immediately followed by a piercing shriek. Brenda. She stood on her lawn, pointing a trembling finger at her damp roses, her face contorted in a mask of pure outrage. He's flooding my property! He's destroying my roses! Call the police! Call the National Guard! Cell phones were out, all up and down the block. Mr. Henderson looked less annoyed, more bewildered. Mrs. Gable was definitely taking notes now, possibly dictating them into her phone. Caught up in the adrenaline, the noise, the sheer glorious absurdity of it all, I made a snap decision. "Bodie, keep it running! I'm going in!" Ignoring Sarah's frantic, "Dave, no!" I grabbed the cheap surfboard I'd bought optimistically weeks ago, scrambled onto the launch platform, and flung myself onto the churning water. The wave, while impressive, was also violently unpredictable. It grabbed the board, spun me around like a sock in a washing machine, and deposited me, sputtering and gasping, in a heap at the far end of the tank. Wipeout, spectacular. Dignity, non-existent. Laughter erupted from a few onlookers. And that's when the sirens started. Not one patrol car this time. 2. Plus a white van with Oakwood Creek Code Enforcement stenciled on the side. They pulled up just as I was dragging myself, soaked and defeated, out of the wave tank. Brenda descended upon them like avenging fury. "Officers! Inspector! Arrest him! Shut this monstrosity down! It's illegal! It's dangerous! It's wetting my petunias!" Officer Miller pinched the bridge of his nose. Officer Chen looked like he was seriously reconsidering his career choice. The code enforcement guy, a weary-looking man named Stan, pulled out a clipboard that seemed even more menacing than Brenda's. "All right, Mr. Miller," Officer Miller said, his voice tight with forced patience. "We've got multiple noise complaints, a possible water runoff violation, and whatever this is." He gestured at the still roaring wave machine. "Shut it down now." Bodie, looking slightly less chill now, hit the emergency stop. The roar died down to a gurgle, then silence. The sudden quiet felt deafening. Stan, the code enforcement guy, stepped forward. "Gonna need to see detailed plans, permits, noise level certifications, water usage reports, and probably a structural engineering assessment for this, sir." He surveyed the scene. "Frankly, I've never seen anything like it outside a water park." Brenda was practically vibrating with righteous vindication. "Fines! Issue him fines! Maximum fines!" I stood there, dripping, shivering slightly, my brief moment of watery triumph evaporating under the harsh glare of suburban law and order. The wave machine sat silent, a huge, wet, monumentally expensive testament to my poor impulse control. The cops issued a formal warning about the noise. Stan slapped a bright orange "Notice of Violation Cease Operations" sticker onto the control panel. Fines were pending investigation. The crowd dispersed, muttering. Brenda gave me a final, triumphant glare before retreating to inspect her traumatized roses. Sarah just looked at me, shook her head slowly, and went inside. Peak chaos achieved. The wave was silenced, for now. The next day, the silence from the backyard was deafening. My expensive wave machine sat there like a beached whale, collecting leaves. The orange violation sticker mocked me. The accrued HOA fines for the original pool infractions were still sitting on the counter, now joined by the looming threat of city-level penalties that probably had extra zeros on the end. Sarah found me staring blankly at the dormant beast, nursing a coffee. "So," she said, leaning against the doorframe, "was it worth it?" I turned, considering. My backyard was a wreck. My savings account was decimated. Half the neighborhood thought I was a lunatic. The other half probably agreed with Brenda. I was facing a bureaucratic nightmare with the city. And yet, seeing the look on Brenda's face when that first wave hit her roses, I said slowly. A small smile crept onto my face. "Yeah, maybe. Almost." "Almost?" "Okay, the wipeout wasn't ideal. and the impending financial ruin is a bit of a downer." I sighed. But for one glorious, roaring 95-decibel moment, Dave Miller was king of his own backyard ocean. "You're an idiot," she said, but there was affection in her voice. She came over and put an arm around my shoulder. "A magnificent, soaking wet idiot. So what now, Captain Ahab?" "Now?" I looked at the silent machine, then towards Brenda's house. "Now. I read the fine print." The following weeks were a blur of paperwork, phone calls, and surprisingly tedious research into noise abatement technology and municipal water regulations. Stan from Code Enforcement turned out to be surprisingly reasonable once Brenda wasn't breathing down his neck. He mostly seemed baffled by the whole thing. Bodie and Chaz, surprisingly, didn't disappear. They helped me navigate the permit appeals, offering slightly spaced out but occasionally useful advice. "Maybe plant some, really absorbent shrubs, dude." Kevin helped me rig up a decibel meter that sent alerts to my phone if the ambient noise, like Henderson's Chihuahua, exceeded certain levels, just for spite. The HOA fines? I paid the original ones for the fence and the pump enclosure, after building a ridiculously over-engineered Brenda-proof box. The excessive vibrancy charge was dropped after I produced receipts for standard pool chemicals. The wave machine? That was trickier. After much negotiation, inspections, and the installation of some expensive sound-dampening panels that made the whole setup look even more like a discarded spaceship part, we reached a compromise. A fragile, heavily conditional compromise. I could run the wave machine, but only between the hours of 2 p.m. and 4 p.m. on the second Saturday of each month. Maximum runtime, 30 minutes. Noise levels strictly monitored. Any infraction, any complaint deemed valid by Stan, and the permit was permanently revoked. So, that's the new normal. My wave machine sits silent 99% of the time, a bizarre monument to my suburban rebellion. It's less a surf park, more an extremely expensive conversation piece. Do I regret it? Financially, absolutely. Logically, probably. But every second Saturday, for 30 glorious minutes, I fire that bad boy up. The roar returns, the wave churns. I usually wipe out immediately. Kevin monitors the decibels. Sarah watches from the patio, shaking her head and smiling. And Brenda? She stands on her lawn, arms crossed, glaring. Sometimes she pretends to measure the noise with her phone. Sometimes she vigorously shakes her fist. But she knows I'm within the letter of the law, however absurd that letter may be. We've achieved a state of détente, a heavily regulated, mutually annoying suburban Cold War. So yeah, my HOA didn't like my pool. Now they really don't like my wave machine. But it's my wave machine. It's loud, it's ridiculous, and for half an hour a month, it makes my little patch of Oakwood Creek feel a tiny bit less beige. And honestly, watching Brenda fume while I fail miserably at surfing a 2-foot wave in my own backyard? That, my friends, is priceless. Maybe not pay off the second mortgage, priceless, but priceless enough for me. Now, if you'll excuse me, the second Saturday is approaching, and I think I finally figured out how to stay upright for more than 3 seconds. Probably,